Hello, everyone. My name is Lami. Today, March Wong and Me Boy will be interviewing Christina Revelo, where she currently attends Brooklyn College in New York City. In this interview, Christina focuses on the identity of Asian and Asian Americans and the hardships that the Asian community has been through and is continuing to go through in 2021. She will also mention how important mental health is when dealing with racism and cultural identity, and how the system of white supremacy's goal is to break up all BIPOC groups, which, if you guys remember, also connects to the PA News episodes with Dr. Yu and Dr. An. Now, enough of me talking. Let's get into March and Me's interview.
Hi, my name is Marge. I'm from Pacific Academy. I'm a senior now.
Yeah, and hi, my name is Mibui, and currently I am a senior at Pacific Academy.
It's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you. Miss, can I call you
You can call me Christina. It's okay.
Okay. Christina, can you tell us a little bit about you more?
Okay. Hello. So I am Christina Revelo. I am a master's student at Brooklyn College here in New York City. I study experimental psychology. My research focuses on ethnicity, identity, and race, specifically for Asian Americans. Also really excited to talk about, I'll also be a PhD student in developmental psychology starting in the fall. So that's really exciting for me. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited.
I thought you are just focusing on the sociology. I don't know you are just study the psychology, but I saw the graph. Your some part your research is about the psychology. I mean that is interesting, because now the people have a more mental issue after they by the discriminations, and that is really tough.
Yeah, so sociology and psychology are very closely related. I think a lot of the research on culture and Asian American experiences is about sociology, but then I tie in psychology by studying mental health, depression, self-esteem, like those kinds of things as well.
My major in the college, I want to focus on the sociology, so I think that is a good topic and analyze how the people thinking or how they behavior. And yeah, maybe this can use for solve some question and give the solutions about that.
What made you, like I heard March tell that you speak at the conference, and my question is that what made you want to focus on anti-Asian racism in the United States?
Well, first, like I am an Asian American in the United States. So it was really important to me to be able to tell my own story, to tell our stories and experiences. I feel like too often in history, our experiences and stories, they get whitewashed or erased completely from history classes, textbooks, education. And I just wanted to be able to tell my own story and help others amplify their voices. And in psychology and sociology and all these behavioral sciences, a lot of research documents the effects of discrimination on ethnic racial minorities, but Asian Americans are the most understudied ethnic racial group, and they're also the most underfunded in research. So I feel like I really wanted to be able to focus on us and highlight our experiences.
And based on you're saying, because we have the Asians face, so we are the part of the issue. No, it's we are fully involved. But who or what has been your greatest source of this inspiration for your research?
My greatest inspiration, it might sound funny, but I think myself, because a lot of people say psychology research is me search. Like we want to study what we want to know for ourselves and to see if others think the way that we think, or at least that's how I feel. So I guess I just want to be able to, I guess my greatest inspiration is myself and minorities and Asian Americans, or Asians in general, just because I want to be able to tell like our stories. I guess it's really just about highlighting that we're not a monolith, that we're not the model minorities, we're more than that. You know, we're a huge group of people that make up East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, Central Asians, and we all have different experiences. And too often we only focus on East Asians and their experiences, and then it gets generalized to all of us, even though our experiences are so different. And I think that that's my greatest inspiration, is to be able to highlight all of our individual experiences, customs, cultures, values.
Wow, that is really, this is the your answer that I didn't expect, because we learned this based on, we have a kind of big project in our school is problems based on learning. So first at all, we didn't realize that it's issue, or most of us don't know about that. So we start this at the teacher telling us this is have a cases by the Asian be attacked by the discrimination, and we see the whole history, and we realize, wow, that is really serious issue, and because this is unfair. And or if, like you just mentioned that you are, because you want to know about yourself, right? But
Mm.
do you have some experience that happened on you physically, that you realize I'm not part of the American, or um, I'm different with something else, someone else?
Yeah, I think everybody has an experience that really opens their eyes. And I think for me, it was, I'm from, like, my parents were born in the Philippines. I was born here, but, you know, like, I identify as a Filipino American. But, you know, to get a better life, my parents came here and they raised me in Brooklyn. And where I live is actually like pretty white. Like, I grew up in a white neighborhood, went to white elementary, middle school, high school. And it wasn't really until college that I realized that I was constantly trying to fit in with my white peers. You know, I wouldn't bring Filipino lunch to school. I wouldn't, I didn't even want to learn my own language, you know, because people were always making fun of like my eye shape, or like how my grandpa couldn't speak proper English, you know. So there was constant times where I was just like, I wish I wasn't even Filipino. Like, I wish I was white. And I know a lot of people really resonate with that, like, not even just Asian Americans, and like across all minority groups. So I think it was just growing up not feeling like I could fully express myself and be who I really was, because I kept trying to push it down. Like, I didn't want to be, like, I just wanted to be American. And my mom always like talks about this. She'll make fun of me how, like, in the second grade, one day I came home and I was like, I'm not Filipino, like, I'm American, like, don't call me that. Because I just was so ashamed. And it really, like, looking back on it, like, makes me so upset that like little me and so many other kids out there are just constantly feeling like that, like we don't belong, even though we were born here. And it feels like a lot of people now are coming up and speaking about it. So it makes me feel like, you know, I'm not alone. Like, I wasn't the only person who really felt like this. So it kind of like resonates into my research, because I was like, do other people feel like this too? Can I statistically prove this as well? So I it's really just accumulation of like life events that have occurred my whole entire life. And then with the pandemic and with the rise of anti-Asian discrimination, it just was heightened, and it felt even more personal because now everybody's speaking up about it and people are finally hearing about it. Like, we don't feel like we're American enough. And it's because of these systems that are in place that make us feel like we're not American, even if we were born here. It's a really long-winded explanation.
Like, because we are not like you, you know, like the story is not same as you, because we are living in California, and especially the city we live in is Irvine, and have a most Asians population. and we go to like 90% Asian school, so we don't see as this is the trouble. We're living under the bubble. And this is may met. Some people don't realize this is a serious issue in the United States. And especially once I know there are a lot of people has been discriminations, or they refuse their own cultures, and it's really really hard to know that, because if like the people really involved in one circumstance and the people just say no and refuse everything to those people, and maybe it's so hard to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say something, me?
Like I also have like one experience about being racist against, like even I'm in California too. But then I'm thinking like, how can we help students to see like what discrimination really are when they're living in California? Like, do you have any ideas?
Well, I know a lot of attacks have been happening in Oakland in the Bay Area that I've been reading about. So, like, I guess maybe it's just specifically where you guys live that is very Asian. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing to note is that, yes, where you live is very Asian, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen to somebody who lives in your area. I think it's important to note that it could happen to anybody. When I see these hate crime attacks against the elderly, the first thing that comes into my head is like, that could have been my mom. Even though I'm not living in that area or we don't travel in that area, the first thing that always I think of, like, what if that was my mom? What if that was my aunt? What if that was somebody that I'm related to? Like, I would be devastated if that happened to me or to anybody I know. It's terrible that it's happening at all. But I think what you guys can do is you have to constantly be aware of your surroundings, because unfortunately, it doesn't really matter where you are. It could happen to anybody. And it's the best way to spread awareness is to share it on social media, honestly, because social media has so much power. People weren't even talking about it until like Daniel Day Kim and Daniel Wu came out and were like, we're going to give $25,000 to people, to somebody who will report this crime and find who did this to this person. It wasn't until famous Asian Americans or famous Asians were coming out and talking about it that we finally got like media coverage about it, like outside of our own circles. I think it's important to diversify your feeds, your Instagram feeds, your Twitter feeds, on following people who report Asian American or Asian news, because you could share those with people who don't actually know anything about it. If you post about it, you spread awareness about it, you talk about it with your community, your peers, your school, that's the best way to spread awareness.
This
Like
is
what?
why we have this conversation. We really want to spread out this information to our community, especially like people don't know about that. It's it's definitely like you say. Maybe next person will will become like the person who are very close, who are very like because we don't know what's gonna happen. Like we don't know this is when this issue gonna be stopped, but I really hope so.
Yeah.
Because a lot of youth are start working, like our generation are really treat us is seriously. So I really have the hope for someday it can be solved or can be changed.
Me too.
What do you think is the best way to respond to racist or racial discriminations? Like many, like as I noticed, when a person being like racist against, they feel very insecure about their like ethnicity or even skin color. They feel like they're like, I think depressed. It's just I think. So what do you think like is the best way for them to like respond to those?
It's a really tough question, and there is no direct answer to it because everybody is different. And I think that's kind of why I do this kind of research to find out how we can respond to discrimination and survive it. I think it's important to not internalize it, which is easier said than done, to not feel embarrassed or ashamed about it, and to be able to talk about it with your family, your friends, or even a mental health counselor or therapist, because mental health is so important and it's so helpful for situations like this. Like having somebody to talk to who is culturally competent in your custom culture and values, and having someone who's trained to help you get through this, it's a really important step, I think, in responding to racial discrimination. If you have if you have had this experience, I think it's best not to just sit and think about it on your own. I think it's important to talk about it because you're probably not the only person that has experienced it. And once you open up about it, other people might open up about it as well. And then you could start that healing process together. And I think really the biggest response to racial discrimination is to really address the violence and what's really going on. We have to speak about what are really the root causes of racial discrimination. And to me, it's white supremacy. It's structural racism and biases that create conditions where people of color who should be allies actually end up turning on each other because we want to uplift white supremacy. We're trying to assimilate into this country. We want to be validated. But, we are our own individual people. We don't have to live up to the white standards. We have to be able to stand up with Asian communities and other minorities and stand against racism in general as a whole, because racism is the common foe for all of us. We need to fight against it any way that we can, and the best way to do it is through mutual allyship, standing together with our Black and brown brothers and sisters. We have to stand with them and fight against racism, and we can do that together.
Have you learned any cases about like Asian American history?
I mean, I have done a lot of research on my own, like not, schools don't really teach it at all. So
Do you think have a ethnic class in the school is the better solution to help this issue?
yeah, I wasn't able to be part of those kinds of groups growing up, but I really, as an adult now and a graduate student, I am constantly trying to find Asian American groups, Filipino groups, just so I can have like a social support community. And a lot of these times, these groups, they come together, they do talks about history, they do talks about how, well, like what we can do, especially in this time and day and age. I think it's important to have that social support of people who really understand what you personally are going through, because your school's not going to teach you about it. Even in college, it's not a requirement. Your degree requires general history, which we all know is European or American history. Our history is an elective, like Asian American studies is a choice that you take. You don't have to take it. It's an option for you to take it. It's not required. So I think also a really big thing for me is changing the education curriculum to include our history as well, because I shouldn't have to go out and do all this research and teach myself about it. I feel like it should have been taught to me when I was growing up.
Yes, like just like you say, if the people don't have awareness about that, there's no way to solve this issue. And I believe what the best way is to educate them and also have the class and let the teacher teach about that. Yes. Do you want?
I just know, because this is just based on what I experienced before. Because like, it's really hard for me. Um, Sorry. It's just really hard for me to like knowing or facing or like experience those feelings. And like it is so unfair for Asians American or even Asian or international students to like not being seen as important as other. So I have another questions. Like I'm really like this is like I really interested in this was like, is there any aspect we can borrow from Black Lives Matter movements and use that to part to show Asians' voice?
I definitely, yeah, I see what you, yes, Black Lives Matter and the civil rights movements in general, Black people constantly have been fighting for not just their rights, but all of our rights as well. Without, I think it's very important to note that without Black Lives Matter and the civil rights movement, there wouldn't be any calls for Asian Americans. You know, they paved the way for us. And I think it's important to follow their lead by standing against racism, not just for Asian Americans, but for all minoritized BIPOC groups. I think we need to follow their lead in protesting. We need to organize communities, organize as a community to fight against the racism that's occurring in our communities, because we need to vote for people who actually have our best interests in their hearts. You know, it's really important to spread petitions, donate to organizations that actually affect our communities. Um, it's really about standing together as minoritized groups, as a community in general, as a country, to stand up for all of our rights. So we need to stop fighting against each other and we need to come together. There's also a lot of things like contacting your legislators and your district attorneys. A lot of people spread like phone numbers that you can call, or a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that. So they send out email templates where all you have to do is like fill in your name, and then you send the email and it gets sent to like your district attorneys, your local government, and it urges them to see how many people are worried about these issues and to kind of force them into a position where if you don't acknowledge it, we will vote you out. You know, I mean, I don't know if you guys are 18 yet, but you know, it's really important to spread the awareness the same way that they spread awareness. You know, a lot of people started creating Instagram accounts that highlight Asian American discrimination. They highlight the news, they talk about everything that you can possibly do to like the funds you can donate to, how you can be a support to these communities. And I think that we're all on the right path if we're like following that.
Do you want to share some like research or information you want to bring today?
Yeah, sure. I actually have. So basically, you attended my conference, but I'll just briefly go over it.
Okay, please.
My research is all about anti-Asian discrimination during COVID. Really big things for me are, what are Asian Americans' experiences of discrimination? Like a general, broad, what is it? What happened? I created a measure that identifies specific expectations, fears, and feelings during COVID. So I wanted to know if maybe those items really predict depression and self-esteem in Asian Americans, and if ethnic identity mediates those relations. So ethnic identity is about how strongly you feel connected to being your ethnicity. So in this case, Asian. So how strongly do you identify with being Asian, Asian American? And if you do feel very strongly connected to your group, does it alleviate the pain that can be caused by discrimination? So I collected data over the past year from May to February. So my sample is made up of East and Southeast Asians, adults over 18, from across the United States. So I posted online on like any social media outlet I could possibly get access to. I messaged people on Instagram to post about it as well. So I have 116 participants. Most of them are 18 to 29. So it's a lot of Asian like young adults they're majority female, they have like a wide background in their education, their income, their immigrant generation status. So it's a very varying amount of people who identify as East or Southeast Asian. So this is a graph of the measure I created. The blue bars represent items that relate to feelings. The red bars relate to fears, and the green bars relate to like actual experiences of discrimination. So basically what I found was the top fears were, I was afraid to call for sneeze in public. And that one really was like hit home for me. That was like one of the first things during the pandemic in the beginning of like March, which crazy enough was actual year ago. Like I was going food shopping or like on public transportation, like anytime I felt like an urge to like cough or sneeze, like I just would hold it in because I was scared that people would think that I had COVID and that they would avoid me. And a lot of people really resonated with that one. It was the number one most clicked, like most applied to fear. There was also hearing or seeing news of hate crimes towards Asian Americans made me scared. So a really big part of my research is fears. Does seeing it constantly, because we were quarantined, we were constantly just on our phones looking and seeing every single day, like this is happening, and it's still happening today. And really fear, like just being scared, not having any discrimination actually occur to you. So just being scared really is driving people's mental health states in terms of like high rates of depression, low rates of self-esteem. There are things like the anticipation of being racially targeted in public is what I'm afraid of. I feared being physically or verbally harassed for being Asian. I'm afraid to leave my home. And I know a lot of people might say like, okay, but I'm not Asian American and I felt alone during the pandemic. I felt uncomfortable to be alone in public, or I feel invisible. But I wanted to make sure that I captured these experiences specifically for Asian Americans. So I asked questions about like, were you targeted? Did you feel like people were treating you differently? And I actually asked for direct quotes so people could like type in what their experiences were. And it was really, really sad to like sit there and read through people's experiences, saying things like, people egged my house, people egged my car, people were yelling China virus at me and my family when we were just walking down the street. People reported actually being physically harassed or hurt because of the whole language being used around the pandemic and the coronavirus. It being called the China virus really, really affected a lot of people. It really shows that words do matter and how you talk about it. And especially if you're a person in power in the government, you should not be using any ethnic group to scapegoat or distract from the fact that there is a pandemic going on. Another really big thing for me was this is basically showing individual variability across the 116 samples. So it's showing that, some people had high experiences of discrimination or high fears of discrimination or having a lot of feelings about COVID. So it's showing that, not every person had the same experiences at all. And I think it's really important to highlight that we're all different. We all have different experiences. This is also done across the country. So based on where you're located, maybe you didn't have the same experience because like you guys are saying, like you live in a community which is 90% Asian or mostly Asian. So maybe you guys didn't have the same experiences, fears, or feelings that somebody who doesn't live in an Asian American area or Asian area in general would feel. I also am really interested in neighborhoods and spaces of comfort. So I think context and setting really matters. So I asked people where did you feel comfortable in? And a lot of people said home, of course. A lot of people also said around people of color, Asian areas or stores. And then again, there are always going to be some people who just didn't feel uncomfortable anywhere. They said everywhere. They felt comfortable because they probably live in an Asian dominated area. Another area of interest was spaces of discomfort, which really varied more. So these were places that people didn't feel comfortable being in. So public transportation, stores and restaurants, non-Asian areas or stores. So when I say that, I'm saying like people who can't go to their local Chinatowns or areas that are like Asian supermarkets and stuff like that.
Mm.
And then I wanted to make sure that I didn't just capture, like everybody, I could say everybody was like, didn't want to go outside or didn't want to leave their home. So I wanted to make sure that I captured people's responses and why they felt uncomfortable there. And a lot of it was just being in a private space. People were saying like they just wanted to be alone and away from either COVID or just people in general. And then a lot of people also reported saying they were scared that if they were in this area or this setting that they would experience discrimination, or that they actually did experience this discrimination. So I also collected data on their treatment during COVID. So 41% of the participants reported feeling that people were treating them differently during quarantine. 59% reported being treated suspiciously or avoided. 33% actually receiving verbal harassment from strangers. I also wanted to know like who was doing this to them. So I asked like what ethnicity was the person that was treating them differently, and 67% reported their perpetrators as white. I was also really interested in knowing if anything actually made them feel better. And unfortunately, 51% of the participants who experienced some sort of avoidance or harassment reported that nothing made them feel better. And that truly, truly broke my heart, because other people were saying, my friends and my family, maybe social media was helping them, like music, things like that. But at least half of these people reported that nothing made them feel better about it. And reporting things like, it just made me angry, upset, it made me feel less than, it made me feel like I didn't belong. And it was really heartbreaking to see that it was such a big percentage of people that were experiencing discrimination, and just, you just have to deal with it. They're not sure what to do or how to react, except just people just say, get over it. And it was really, really heartbreaking. So I also want to know, we were quarantined, you couldn't really leave your neighborhood, you couldn't really leave your area unless you were an essential worker. So 82% of the participants said that they did feel safe in their own neighborhood. And that is because, they were saying, I'm familiar with my neighbors, I know my neighbors, I have no fear of discrimination in my neighborhood, or I feel safe, there are low crime rates, things like that. So it was really great to see that, a lot of people did feel safe where they were. But of the 18% that reported feeling not safe in their neighborhood, almost half said it was because they were scared of experiencing discrimination in their neighborhood, reporting lack of trust, reporting that, maybe they lived in an area that was mostly white, that didn't have a lot of people of color in it. So they were just feeling like if they stepped outside their house, they would experience discrimination or a hate crime. So mental health treatment is a really big thing for me. I asked participants if they started to see a therapist or if they had a therapist during the pandemic. So 7% of people reported that they actually started to see a therapist. 16% said they already had a therapist. 7% reported that they stopped seeing their therapist, and 71% reported never having one at all. So based on those people, I asked if, they knew any therapists or clinics in their area, and 61% said they did not know about any sort of mental health treatment in their area. But 39% reported that they were willing and wanted to look into seeing mental health treatment, which I think is really important because mental health is super stigmatized in the Asian communities. People don't seek out mental health treatment unless it's like absolutely bottom of the barrel, they need it, absolute, like no other choice. It's really stigmatized, and it's something also I'm working towards highlighting in research and highlighting in general, that we need to seek out mental health treatment. We need to stop being afraid of it or stop relying on other forms, because a lot of customs and cultures in Asian communities are about, maybe using like herbal medicines or using religion, saying like, oh, like it's okay, like I'll pray it away, like I'm not going to feel like this anymore if I pray about on it or if I go to church on it. But it's so much more than that. Mental health, depression, having low self-esteem, having anxiety, they're real symptoms, they're real diagnoses that actually need professional help. And you can't just rely on religion to like alleviate these symptoms, because they're not going to go away, and the longer you sit on it, the worse you're going to feel. So I think a really big thing for me is we need to have therapists that are culturally competent. They need to understand our customs and our cultures and our values, and they need to know that, just because we rely on shamans or faith healers, that doesn't make us crazy. It's just part of our religion, or it's part of our cultures, that like that's what we were taught or like raised on. There sometimes we don't use like Western medicine because it's not part of what we were taught growing up. So I think having therapists that actually understand that, we're not crazy, that like this is just what we usually like talk about and rely on, and having people that speak our languages, because a lot of immigrants or people or older elders, they don't speak English, and they would be more comfortable with somebody who spoke their language. So it's all about training people who actually speak these languages that are part of our communities. And the last question I asked people were, what would you have wanted the government or policymakers to do or say to make you feel safe? And there was a very wide variety of responses. People were saying like a public announcement, saying policy for punishment and protection. So if you're experiencing discrimination, that person should be punished and we should be protected. And there should be announcements about it so people are aware and stop causing these harms. But the president has made announcements about it like a couple of times, and people are speaking out about it now, but it's still feeling really like nothing is going to happen. People don't feel confident in the government because they really let us down, calling it the China virus and letting it occur for like letting those words just ruminate for so long. A lot of people were saying we need to change the language used, but it kind of just feels too late. People are still to this day using the term China virus or Kung flu or whatever racist rhetoric they are choosing. A lot of people also said that, instead of calling it the China virus, instead of focusing on Asians, we should have focused on preventative measures for COVID. A lot of people also mentioned direct blaming or mentioning of Trump, saying that if it wasn't for him, if he didn't say it, then none of this would have happened, which is very true. And then again, a lot of people also reported that they don't expect anything to be done, that nothing can be done. And it's really eye-opening to see that people don't have faith in the government. It's not surprising that people don't have faith, but when people are just saying that nothing can be done and it doesn't matter if they do anything, like it's really sad. So
thank you for this information, really.
I think I probably went through that quickly.
Yeah,
if you have any
no way, like you show all the data, like use the data to say the issue. Like obviously we can tell by number, like this is just really really short. And I want to ask, like, are you doing this by alone, or you have a group to help you to do that?
Well, it started off as like my research for my master's. So to get my master's, I had to create a proposal, create a thesis, and like I didn't have to collect data, it was just something that was really important to me. Actually, I started creating this project like before the pandemic, before coronavirus even hit, and it was basically supposed to just focus on anti-Asian discrimination in general. But then around March of last year, like we started hearing about racism and attacks and stuff. And it kind of really hit home for me. And I was like, I'm going to change my research slightly because I want to focus on what's going on right now. I want to be somebody who can highlight what is actually occurring. And I want to be able to bring in perspectives from our communities. You know, like I didn't want to just wait for somebody else or somebody to whitewash over it. You know, like I wanted to be able to tell our stories. And I think it's so important to me. And I know I've said it like a few times, like of telling our own stories. And I don't want people to talk over us. I want to be the one to bring it out there, you know.
Who give you support the most? Like,
Oh,
I mean, like,
special shout out to my mentor, my advisor. Her name is Yana Kachirko. She has been the absolute best advisor, mentor, person, human being in general. She's not even Asian, like, and she has been such a support. She's one of the greatest human beings in the world. She's supported me through every single step. She has done her own research into our communities. She's actually looking, like reading literature for me and for herself now, because like she's so invested in this because of me, and it's been amazing, you know. And I think it's a really great opportunity to have, you know, for it to not just be for Asians, you know. Like she has, you know, she has no connection to the Asian American group, and she still was willing to take me on, mentor me, learn about my research, help me find resources, everything she possibly could. And it's been the most meaningful experience for the past 2 years with her. I think it's really important to have a community that, like, it's important to have a community of like Asians, Asian Americans, but it's also important to have a community of allies that are outside of our group
yeah,
as well.
definitely. I strongly agree with you. Yes, like because this is not about all Asian group. I mean, outside we still need to let them have an awareness. We're
Mhm.
now aliens, right? We are
Mhm.
just same as you.
Mhm.
And I really thank for you telling about this information. I hope that your experience can really does help our community, like to really do something change, you know.
Mhm.
And let me know if you like have a or what can we do, you know, like if this kind of chance, just email me and
Yeah, of
I'll,
course.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, of course. I would love to stay in contact with you guys. I'm really, really grateful that you gave me this opportunity and reached out to me to be able to share my work like this, especially with your community and especially with your school, especially because you're on the West Coast, you know, like I think it's really great to be able to connect like cross country.
Last question, do you have a wish or hope to us?
um, I guess my wish is that one day my research will be obsolete, you know, like it won't be necessary anymore. You know, so many people have been studying discrimination in general for so long, and it's so crazy that like it still keeps coming back, you know, like it stems all the way back to when we first, like when we were first brought here, you know, in like the 1500s. You know, racism has been occurring nonstop to all minoritized communities, and it's just like, when is it going to end? You know, like it's, we do this research, we prove that it happens, we prove that it's harmful, and like it's kind of sometimes really defeating because you're reading up on research that is like from like the 90s that people were conducting, and you're seeing that the same things are still happening. You know, this racism isn't new, it's just constantly coming back, like every, like it's just being brought up constantly every like few years. Something huge happens, you know, where we're like, we need to stand up against this, but it's like we constantly keep doing it. So I guess my wish and my hope for us is that we can just keep fighting against it and hope that it finally ends. But I know that's like such a long shot.
But I think this is doable. I really does. I have a
And
hope.
I love that you think that, because really, like you guys are high school students, like you have so much ahead of you. And I love that you guys are fighting for social justice any way that you guys can. And like doing this series of talks is so important. And I think it's so important to spread this information. And I love that you guys are doing this. And I wish that when I was in high school, like I was as dedicated as you guys were, because it's really inspiring to see like youth really come out and fight for our communities. It's great work you guys are
Thank you
doing.
so much. Thank you. That again, I'm so appreciate that you are coming here and spend your time to talk about that. Um, I think, yeah, and you start awareness at college, right?
Yeah.
But is this really hard to in the high school because all of surround you, you are feel different from anyone, but I I know the feeling is training. I kind of speechless by your story, and I don't know what can I say. Like this is unbelievable. I join a lot of conference. You are not the only one, but the youth story is like more like the student actions. Another one just like adult, but I really want to bring you up in here and to talk to my classmate that those people are kind of like same as you to just push it, to just have it, and if more and more people realize this issue, and someday this one really can solve it.
Yeah, I think that I feel like we're still struggling too, like even though there's so much awareness going on, like it's really sad to say, but like people still don't care. Like people still think like because we're Asian Americans and because of the model minority myth that, like, oh, this is just now happening to us. People think that this is new. This is like, but it's not. It's, like we all have stories of feeling discriminated against when we were children, like back when we were in elementary school. Almost every single person that I know can talk about experiences, not even just being Asian, like people have experiences, their very first experiences in elementary school. And you're a child, you don't know how to process those things yet because you don't understand what's going on. You just think that your friends are like making like a joke and that you're supposed to just laugh along with it. So I think that it's really hard for youth to fight against it because you feel like you want to belong. You want your friends to like you. You don't want to feel like an outsider. So you don't comment on it. You don't speak out against it because you're scared of like disrupting like a friend group or disrupting like a system that's been in place for so long. And I think that youth like you guys are starting to come out and fighting against this and being open about it. And I think it's so important that you guys talk about these things with people because right now, like you're in high school, like you have your whole lives ahead of you. And I really think that it's great that you're doing it. And I hope that you guys keep pushing it for like the rest of your lives. I don't know if that's like asking too much, but I want you guys to know that what you're doing is so important. What you're doing is so, so important. And I think it's really like inspiring to not just me, but I'm sure to so many other people that you talk about our issues and our stories and that you broadcast it and that you share it with your school and that hopefully it reaches so many others, outside of your communities even. And I think that this is the only thing that we can do to fight against discrimination and fight for social justice is just to keep talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Just really let me know like if you have like good opportunity like the conference, we would like to support you.
Of course, yes. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you so much.
Thank you guys. It was such a pleasure to talk with you.
me too. Me too. I really learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope I can contact you next time, really. Yes.
Yes, we can stay in touch for
Yes.
sure.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you for coming here. Bye bye. Bye bye.
What an amazing and powerful interview. Thank you so much, March, me, and Christina. I hope everyone watching was able to absorb, think, and learn from everything Christina said. I really like how she mentions how to respond to harassment and how to bring awareness to these kinds of issues happening. Also, she says how mental health is very stigmatized in the Asian community and how she is working towards highlighting and researching more about this issue to make a change. These issues also connect to Black Lives Matter because of how heavily the movement is influenced by civil rights and equality. These issues also need to be discussed in the classroom. A large amount of Asian American history is not being taught. And if it is being taught, it's either not enough or it's an elective course that isn't required, which is why all schools should require students to take an ethics studies class. The last thing I will leave you with, teachers and students, and to whoever is watching this, what will you do to help?
And I do